You could start.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وابتغوا إليه الوسيلة وجاهدوا في سبيله لعلكم تفلحون. إن الذين كفروا لو أن لهم ما في الأرض جميعا ومثله معه ليفتدوا به من عذاب يوم القيامة ما تقبل منهم ولهم عذاب أليم. يريدون أن يخرجوا من النار وما هم بخارجين منها ولهم عذاب مقيم. والسارق والسارقة فاقطعوا أيديهما جزاء بما كسبا نكالا من الله والله عزيز حكيم. فمن تاب من بعد ظلمه وأصلح فإن الله يتوب عليه إن الله غفور رحيم. ألم تعلم أن الله له ملك السماوات والأرض يعذب من يشاء ويغفر لمن يشاء والله على كل شيء قدير. يا أيها الرسول لا يحزنك الذين يسارعون في الكفر من الذين قالوا آمنا بأفواههم ولم تؤمن قلوبهم ومن الذين هادوا سماعون للكذب سماعون لقوم آخرين لم يأتوك يحرفون الكلم من بعد مواضعه يقولون إن أوتيتم هذا فخذوه وإن لم تؤتوه فاحذروا ومن يرد الله فتنته فلن تملك له من الله شيئا أولئك الذين لم يرد الله أن يطهر قلوبهم لهم في الدنيا خزي ولهم في الآخرة عذاب عظيم. سماعون للكذب أكالون للسحت فإن جاءوك فاحكم بينهم أو أعرض عنهم وإن تعرض عنهم فلن يضروك شيئا وإن حكمت فاحكم بينهم بالقسط إن الله يحب المقسطين. وكيف يحكمونك وعندهم التوراة فيها حكم الله ثم يتولون من بعد ذلك وما أولئك بالمؤمنين إنا أنزلنا التوراة فيها هدى ونور يحكم بها النبيون الذين أسلموا للذين هادوا والربانيون والأحبار من كتاب الله وكانوا عليه شهداء فلا تخشوا الناس واخشوني ولا تشتروا بآياتي ثمنا قليلا ومن لم يحكم بما أنزل الله فأولئك هم الكافرون وكتبنا عليهم فيها أن النفس بالنفس والعين بالعين والأنف والأذن بالأذن والسن بالسن والجروح قصاص فمن تصدق به فهو كفارة له ومن لم يحكم بما أنزل الله فأولئك هم الظالمون وقفينا على آثارهم بعيسى ابن مريم مصدقا لما بين يديه من التوراة وآتيناه الإنجيل فيه هدى ونور ومصدقا لما بين يديه من التوراة وهدى وموعظة للمتقين وليحكم أهل الإنجيل بما أنزل الله فيه ومن لم يحكم بما أنزل الله فأولئك هم الفاسقون وأنزلنا إليك الكتاب بالحق مصدقا لما بين يديه من الكتاب ومهيمنا عليه فاحكم بينهم بما أنزل الله ولا تتبع أهواءهم عما جاءك من الحق لكل جعلنا منكم شرعة ومنهاجا ولو شاء الله لجعلكم أمة واحدة ولكن ليبلوكم فيما آتاكم فاستبقوا الخيرات إلى الله مرجعكم جميعا فينبئكم بما كنتم فيه تختلفون وأن احكم بينهم بما أنزل الله ولا تتبع أهواءهم واحذرهم أن يفتنوك عن بعض ما أنزل الله إليك فإن تولوا فاعلم أنما يريد الله أن يصيبهم ببعض ذنوبهم وإن كثيرا من الناس لفاسقون أفحكم الجاهلية يبغون ومن أحسن من الله حكما لقوم يوقنون يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تتخذوا اليهود والنصارى أولياء بعضهم أولياء بعض ومن يتولهم منكم فإنه منهم إن الله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين فترى الذين في قلوبهم مرض يسارعون فيهم يقولون نخشى أن تصيبنا دائرة فعسى الله أن يأتي بالفتح أو أمر من عنده فيصبحوا على ما أسروا في أنفسهم نادمين ويقول الذين آمنوا أهؤلاء الذين أقسموا بالله جهد أيمانهم إنهم لمعكم حبطت أعمالهم فأصبحوا خاسرين صدق الله العظيم. Now, inshallah, Sheikh Saim Asif will join us for Tafsir al-Quran. So please stand by.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في القرآن العظيم بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ومنهم من يقول ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار صدق الله العظيم. Dear respected brothers and sisters, alhamdulillah, it's a great blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala once again to be remembering Him. Remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one of the greatest deeds, and that is why in the Quran, one of the few actions, or you could say one of the only actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands to do in great abundance is the dhikr, is his remembrance. He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu dhkurullaha dhikran kathira. O you who believe, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with great abundance. So for us to be involved in such a great action, which in reality is the reason for our existence, is a huge blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Moving forward, so the past 2 days this discussion has been going about shaitan because of the ayat in Surah A'raf, in which he had promised that he will come to the believers from all angles. So we want to cover some of those angles and just cover in general shaitan's tricks and how he's always working to try to get us off the straight path. So we mentioned the story of Abaidullah mentioned in this surah, and is also mentioned 7 times in the entire Quran at least. And that is Allah warning us that we shouldn't fall into fitna, and we shouldn't fall into shaitan's traps, just like Adam alayhi salam fell into it. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continuously throughout the Quran reminds us that shaitan is our enemy. Then we mentioned some things that shaitan orders us to do that are mentioned specifically in the Quran. And then we talked about how one of the scholars of the past wrote an entire book, and there are multiple scholars actually that wrote an entire book dedicated to the tricks of shaitan in order to highlight these tricks so that we can be on guard with regard to these tricks. And then we mentioned how it's important for us not only to learn about good, but also to learn about evil, so that it does when it's going to so that we can actually stay away from the evil. Just like Hudayfa said that people used to ask Allah's Messenger about goodness, while I used to ask him about evil out of fear that it might harm me. So we have to learn about the evils of our time so that we can protect ourselves and we can protect our children from it. Otherwise, we can fall into it easy without even realizing. And then we mentioned some specific deceptions of Iblis, Shaitan. And we were speaking about delving into matters we aren't qualified to delve into, and also criticizing ulama for things we can't even fully comprehend. Just part of this is actually related to the last point I made, which is that we have to be on guard and know the evils of our time and know what our society is based on. Because many times there are things we don't even realize, but they're affecting our mindsets, and this mindset is actually completely un-Islamic. Yet we won't even realize because we haven't learned about the evils of our time. So one good example of this is this point that we always like to criticize. Nowadays, it's becoming more and more common to criticize those that came in the past, and to think that we know more than the ulama of the past, na'udhu-billah, and to criticize them and say that, oh, maybe he didn't know this hadith, maybe he didn't know this point. Yet, if you look at it, this is actually a result of the society that we're living in. And how is that the case? One of the underlying philosophies of our society is progressivism. Progressivism is the belief that mankind is continuously progressing from the beginning of time till now. He's continuously progressing in terms of morality, in terms of everything. So now, if you look at it, this is actually, if you think about it, you might think that, okay, what's wrong with this? Technically we are progressing in terms of technology, etc. It's pretty obvious that we're progressing. That may be the case that in terms of the dunya, but in terms of morality, in terms of intelligence, in terms of knowledge, that is not the case whatsoever. As I explained yesterday, I mentioned many examples of the ulama and how the ulama were on. They used to do so much good, and how nowadays it's actually become much less. Even though we might think it's more because we have so many more tools at our service, and we might even have books at our disposal that the ulama of the past didn't. But this is a big trick of shaitan, because that just mere information is not true knowledge. And the thing is, how is this philosophy against what Islam says? Islam actually teaches us, and there's a hadith, I believe there's a narration in Bukhari as well, that mentions that there is not a single year that comes except that which comes after it is even worse than it. Right. So for us, the pinnacle of society and the highest point that the world ever was at was the time Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam came into the dunya, because he was the best person ever to step foot on the face of the earth. And so Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was the highest, well, at the highest level in terms of spirituality, in terms of knowledge, etc. Then the Sahaba radiallahu anhum came. They were, I mean, obviously they were at the same time as Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and then slowly the Tabi'in came, then the Atba'u Tabi'in came, and slowly, you see that things are constantly on a decrease. So even you'll read, as a scholar, you'll read, or a student of knowledge, you'll read the texts of scholars from just 100 years ago, and you'll be astonished that, subhanAllah, people of such knowledge existed just 100 years ago, and you will be shocked. So you see the general progression of and downwards, that the Sahaba radiallahu Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu were at the pinnacle of ilm, of knowledge, of good, of khair, of morality. Then, slowly, it gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until we are at the lowest point today, and it's only going to get worse and worse until the Day of Judgment. So you see that it's a general rule in Islam. Obviously, the time Mahdi alayhi salam will come, etc. But the general rule is that it'll keep going lower and lower and lower. And whereas then it's actually proven that we are not progressing constantly, that just maybe 20 years, not even 20 years ago, maybe 10, 15 years ago, homosexuality was something which was frowned upon in society. And now it is something where if you feel homosexuality to be wrong, you are going to be frowned upon in society. So this shows us that our morals are not progressing, rather they're regressing. We're going backwards in society. Something which was already declared by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be immoral in the Quran, and even before that in the time of Lut alayhi salam. Now we're going back into such immorality, right? And so many other terrible things that are being justified. It's all because we don't have a correct definition of what is morality. And so we see that this philosophy, this philosophy that has become the background of society, that we're constantly in a state of progression. We're always getting better and better and better in every aspect, in terms of dunya, in terms of technology, in terms of morality, in terms of knowledge. We're getting more better and better and better. This is completely false, and this is against what Islam teaches us. Islam teaches us that the pinnacle of society and the highest point that we were ever at in terms of morality, in terms of deen, in terms of knowledge, was the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Only after him, slowly but surely, there was a decrease until we reach our time, where we are at the lowest point since the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and it's only going to get lower and lower and lower. So this is something that it's a deception of shaitan, that he makes us think that we are much better than those who came before us. Whereas this is actually a sign of the Day of Judgment. It's mentioned in a hadith that إِذَا لَعْنَ آخِرُ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ أَوَّلَهَا, when the latter part of this ummah, the people who are to come later, start cursing the people who came in the beginning, then and I mentioned other things as well, then wait for the Day of Judgment to come, more or less to the meaning. So that's actually a sign of the Day of Judgment, that we will not respect those who came before us, and we will see ourselves to be higher than them, to the point that it will bring some people to the level that they will actually curse those who came before us. And we see that nowadays, unfortunately. We see that people who are extremely affected by other philosophies, not by Islam, they look at things in Islam, they look at what scholars of the past say, and because it doesn't fit their paradigm, it doesn't fit their ideology, they actually talk bad about the scholars of the past, and sometimes even about the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, and they say evil things about them. So this is something which is coming true in our age, and this is a huge trick of shaitan that we have to be very well aware of. So we have to just remember, in general, the general rule is that the time which was closer to the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is in general going to be better than us in every aspect, right? Maybe in the dunya you can say that they weren't as well off, but again, dunya doesn't really matter, right? The hadith says, لو كانت الدنيا تعدل عند الله جناح بعوضة ما سقى كافرا منها شربة ماء. That if the dunya was worth even the wing of a mosquito to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he would not give a disbeliever even a sip of water. So So they may be higher in today in terms of dunya, but in every other aspect, the sort of the people of the past, especially Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were always at the highest point. And as the further we get from the time of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the further we get away from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, the further we are from the highest point. Another trick of shaitan um, is thinking that we can multitask with our phones. Um, and this is something that I'm guilty of as well. So I'm sure many of us are. Um, the reality of the matter is that we can only truly focus on one thing at a time. So what ends up happening is when we try to do two things at once, and for example, we're with our parents, we're with our spouses, we're with our children, we're with our friends, and we're messaging other people, and at the same time we're trying to hold a conversation with them. We see that we can't hold a proper conversation with them, and they can tell that, okay, this person is not fully engaged with me right now, so I'm just going to leave it. And sometimes people get very, very upset at this point. And real word, some of my friends, they actually told me this point multiple times, that I'm waiting for you to finish messaging so you can speak to me properly. So we need people who can remind us like that. But this is a big trick of shaitan, and it's causing us to not fulfill the rights of our brother. If we look at Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, what was his method? Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam literally would, um, when he would turn to somebody, he would turn completely. Imagine, he would never ever just turn his head when let's say if he's facing straight and someone comes to him from the right and asking him a question or just wants to speak to him. Imagine Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's amazing, beautiful character. He would never just turn his head. He would turn his entire body and listen to them with full attention. That's the epitome of beautiful akhlaq of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So we see that is the character of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Whereas us, we don't even pick up our heads from our phones. We try to respond while with our heads down, buried in our phones, and we think that we're multitasking. In reality, we're not even answering them properly. And this happened to me a couple of times. If I'm messaging something, then and somebody asks me a question, I will actually say my message out loud instead of, or say a word from my message out loud instead of responding properly. So you end up losing in both accounts. You're not messaging properly, nor are you speaking properly. So this is something that we have to all work on. And there are many aspects of this, but especially when it comes to other people, we should not try to multitask with our phones. If somebody's speaking to you, give them priority first. You can always message a person later. We should all, may Allah give me a tawfiq for this as well. We should give them priority first. We shouldn't use our phones in the presence of others, because we are not fulfilling their rights in terms of of how you should sit with somebody. And that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam taught us the highest degree of that. He would literally turn them to them completely, and he would make them feel so important, to such an extent that one of the Sahaba, he actually, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas radiallahu anhu, I believe, he said that it got to even though I was new in Islam, he said that I actually thought that I was greater than Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, Umar radiallahu anhu, Uthman radiallahu anhu, and Ali radiallahu anhu. He literally thought that he was the closest person to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That is how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam treated everybody. He would make everybody feel so important, to the extent that he actually firmly believed it, that he asked Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, who is the closest to you? Who is the best? And me or Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam obviously you can treat everybody as if they're the closest, but if somebody asks him point blank like that, he has to answer the truth. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam is Sadiqul Masduq, the most truthful. So he had to answer the truth. So he said, Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. I'm sure he looked very sorry when he said that. But he had to tell the truth. So he said, "Oh, Bakr is closer." They said, "Okay, who's better, me or Umar radiallahu anhu?" He said, he obviously had to tell the truth. So he said, Umar radiallahu anhu. And he said, "Okay, who's better, me or Uthman radiallahu anhu?" And then he said, Uthman radiallahu anhu, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam couldn't tell the truth. He couldn't lie. He had to tell the truth. So Sa'd said that he didn't want to ask after that, and he said that. And I wished I never even asked Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, because if I didn't ask him, I would literally think that I'm the most important person to him. Imagine, that was the amazing character of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and he had to treat everybody like that. And imagine how many hundreds and thousands of Sahaba. Some ulama mentioned the number to be more than 100,000. So imagine treating everybody like this, especially a leader. It's extremely hard for a leader to be like this. Those who are teachers can testify. Those who are parents. It is very hard to show everybody that you're the most important. So for a leader who is leading thousands and thousands of people, imagine this is literally a miracle of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, of his and shows us his miraculous character. Now compare that to us, where we think that we can juggle two things at once while we're on the phone. You can't even look up to the person who's talking to, let alone turn to them completely. And we know that this is a big deception and trick of shaitan. And this is actually something from one of my friends. I messaged in a group that of students of knowledge that what do you think are some tricks of that shaitan tricks us with in the modern age? And one of them mentioned this point, and I thought it was a great point. Then focusing on less important aspects of the deen, right? And this is something that's becoming more common as well. So, for example, you have a person, a young guy, or it doesn't matter, he doesn't have to be young, but he won't know his basic fard, right? He won't know enough to pray his salah. He won't know enough to make proper wudu. He won't even know the fara'id of wudu, the fara'id of ghusl. And yet you see he's going online and having intricate discussions about aqidah, intricate discussions about in-depth things about the differences of opinions between the scholars. And he's following all these discussions and he's thinking he's seeking knowledge. Whereas you see that he doesn't even know the basics of the deen. And this is a trick of our, I mean, maybe it was there in the past as well, but it's becoming more and more common. And it was a trick in the past as well. We see ulama such as Imam Ghazali, rahimahullah. He also indicated toward this in his book, Kitab al-Ilm, in Ihya Ulumuddin. He indicated that this is a trick of shaitan, or he indicated that this is something that people fall into, that they start, whenever they seek knowledge, they start from things which are less important. When in reality, we should be learning the basics, the bare minimum, the fiqh that we need to know in order to live our lives without sin. Yet we find ourselves going into such intricate, detailed masail that we will never be asked about on the Day of Judgment. And then we feel like, oh, I'm doing such a great favor to deen. And this is a big trick of shaitan that we have to be very careful of. And there's so many different things you can say about this. For example, a person who prays Taraweeh and he tires himself out, and then you see him end up missing Fajr, for example. And the thing is, this is not to say that you do either or, right? I'm not trying to say that, oh, you should leave Taraweeh and just pray Fajr with Jama'ah, or just pray Fajr. Rather, I'm saying that we shouldn't allow our nawafil, things which are nafil, to over eclipse our fara'id. You have to put everything in the proper order and in its proper priority. If any nafil or sunnah is clashing with a sunnah, then it was clashing with a fard, then the general rule is that you have to fulfill the fard first, right? So this is a trick of shaitan, that he makes us focus on less important things and makes us feel like, for example, the example is given, I think in a hadith it mentioned that a person, he prays, I'm not sure if it's mentioned in a hadith, but example that we can take is person prays the tahajjud the entire night. He thinks he's getting so close to Allah because the last of the night, etc. But then he misses Fajr. Now, Fajr is a fard, and it specifically mentioned in a hadith Qudsi that my slave cannot get closer to me than with anything greater than that, أفضل مما افترضته عليه, better than that which I have made fard upon him. So the best way we can make him close to Allah is those things which are fard. So we have to prioritize our fard, things which are obligatory. Then, and we also have to do sunnah as well, so do our nawafil as well. But the thing is, we can't do it at the expense of our fara'id. So that's a big trick of shaitan. He makes us focus on less important aspects of the deen, and he makes us feel like, oh, I'm doing such a great work for the deen. I'm doing great work for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm worshiping Allah so much, etc. And you see that we're leaving out such important things, or even we're doing so much extra ibadah, nafil, etc. But we're not focusing on our character with our families, right? And we're treating our parents terribly, even though it's actually mentioned in a hadith that treating your parents, ill-treating your parents is actually from the kaba'ir, the major sins. Imagine we think we're becoming so pious, we're praying all these nawafil, etc., and yet we're treating our parents terribly, right? So you have to focus on things which are important, and then the only way you can know what is more important in deen, what is less important in deen, is if you learn, is if you seek knowledge. If you don't seek knowledge, you will never know. And you will just be guessing the entire time. Oh, I think this seems more important than this, and you'll be using your own mind. So this is why this also emphasizes the importance of learning and seeking ilm. Committing sins in excess obviously is a deception of shaitan, which was there from the beginning of time, right? He tries to make us continuously commit sins until our hearts become completely blackened, and to the extent that we can't even differentiate in terms of our hearts can't even differentiate between good and evil, right? You don't feel bad doing bad anymore, and you don't feel good doing good anymore, which is actually a sign of a believer. If you feel good doing good deeds, if you feel bad doing bad deeds, then you are a mu'min. But if that's not the case, then we have to really question ourselves that where is the level of my iman right now, and how much sin have I committed without begging Allah for forgiveness, that I have reached this point that I don't even feel bad sinning anymore, and I don't even feel good doing good deeds anymore. So this is a big trick of shaitan. Obviously, he slowly we mentioned the footsteps of shaitan, right? So he slowly takes us to doubtful matters, and he takes us to sins, and he takes us to worse sins, to worse sins, to worse sins. So this is from the footsteps of shaitan that we have to be very careful of, and we have to stop it in its tracks, right? As soon as we find ourselves increasing in sin, we just stop and turn back to Allah and beg Allah to give us the strength to stop sinning. And he's at the end of the day, he's the one who's going to give us the strength to stop committing sin. Otherwise, it's not really possible for us to stop sinning without the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to beg Allah to help us and then have firm determination. Once we have firm determination, then we will see that it is easy to overcome the tricks of shaitan. Then thinking evil thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is something that's becoming more common. Right, and we mentioned this in multiple sessions earlier, that we always have to have the best thoughts about Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this, at the end of the day, is actually a branch of having love for Allah. Once we have love for Allah, then we automatically think good about Him. But the problem is, if we haven't built love for Allah, then, for example, if you go through some hardships, then we end up thinking evil thoughts about Allah. And that's actually a reason why many people leave Islam, because they have so many hardships and they think evil about Allah. Why did Allah make this happen to me? Why did Allah do this to me? Why did Allah do that to me? Right? Or as a believer will realize that it's a test from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he'll realize that Allah is actually, if Rasulullah mentioned a hadith that even if a thorn pricks me, imagine a tiny thorn pricks me, I'm getting sins forgiven for that. And other hadith mentioned that your status is raised by the hardships you go through if you have patience on them. Then in reality, we'll see that these hardships will be a means of good for us, right? And the hadith mentions that every matter is good for a believer, whether it be hardships or good times. So, and we went through this in detail, and we're speaking in Surah Baqarah specifically about the ayat which say, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ الَّذِينَ إِذَا أَصَابَتْهُم مُّصِيبَةٌ قَالُوا إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. And we mentioned that Allah mentioned the word bashir, give glad tidings to those who have patience. And there's a subtle indication that even us going through hardships is something which is worth giving glad tidings about. So the thing is, we should never think evil thoughts about Allah, especially because nowadays we see that whenever somebody goes into hardships, then they start thinking evil thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to repel these evil thoughts about Allah. We should know that's the trick of shaitan. And if we have good thoughts about Allah, we will see that even in our hardships, we will see that there's some level of sweetness, right? And I can testify to this, that one of my friends, he goes through severe depression, a very close friend of mine. And yet he tells me that when I'm at the most severe points of depression, sometimes I feel a very sweet feeling, very great closeness to Allah. Even though it's very hard, but you feel a special closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But this only happens if you're building up your love for Allah in normal times, right? If you get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as the hadith mentions, if you get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your good times, then He will know you, meaning He will remember you, and He will grant you so much khair in your hard times, right? So if you're building your love for Allah in your good times, then as soon as your hard times come, then you'll still feel that love for Allah, and even your hardships will have some element of good in them. So this is why we should always think good thoughts about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is a pet peeve of mine. The next one, deception of Iblis, is abusing the ayah, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. So we see nowadays many people, they use this ayah to prove that, we shouldn't just completely go into the akhirah. We shouldn't just completely focus on the deen. You have to focus on the dunya too. And in reality, the ayah, if you look at the context of the ayah, it was revealed in the exact opposite meaning, in the exact opposite context. Ibn Abbas is narrated from him that the ayah before this actually says, من الناس من يقول ربنا آتنا فمن الناس من يقول ربنا آتنا في الدنيا وما له في الآخرة من خلاق. That from amongst the people that are those that say, ربنا آتنا في الدنيا, O Allah, give us from the dunya. وما له في الآخرة من خلاق. But they don't have any share in the hereafter, right? Because they never said anything about the hereafter. They just asked for the dunya. And then if we look at the narration that's mentioned that Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he mentioned that this was revealed with regards to a group of the Bedouins. They used to, at the time of Hajj, they would come and they would ask Allah for good, but they would only ask for things of the dunya. They would only ask, for example, for that this year is a year of good rain, that this year is a year that we have good crops, good yield of crops, and that this year is a year that we have good children. But they would never ask anything about the akhirah, right? But then Allah is saying that, these people will only have a share in, they won't have any share in the hereafter. They'll get whatever they want, whatever you want in the dunya, and they'll end up getting whatever. But actually, Allah doesn't mention that they will get what they want, but He just mentioned that they will not have a share in the akhirah. But when it comes to the dunya, when it comes to the believers, Allah mentions what they will say. Allah mentions the believers. They don't just ask for good in this world for dua. Allah mentions that they ask for the akhirah as well. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. Our Lord, the believers, and then there are some that say, رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً, O our Lord, give us in the dunya, good in the dunya, and give us in the akhirah good, وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ, and protect us from the hellfire. So you see that the thing is that the context that the ayah is being used, yes, it's fine. We shouldn't neglect our dunya as well, right? Islam doesn't teach us to neglect our dunya, that we don't work and we just sit at home and worship all day. Islam doesn't teach us that. Islam teaches us that we go and we strive for our rizq, etc. But the thing is that we have our priorities skewed. And there are actually I've actually heard many times from different people when I told them while I was studying, I told them that I'm studying the deen. I'm studying in such and such madrasa, and many people they would use this ayah and they say, you should also pursue some secular knowledge as well, as if it was more important, and like as if decreasing the status of the education and learning Islamic knowledge. And they would say, and then they would cite this ayah that Allah tells us that that we ask dunya, we ask good in the dunya as well, and the akhirah good. And it's as if they're saying that, look, Allah made dunya come first in this ayah, which means that it's more important. Na'udhu billah. I'm not sure if that's what they mean, but in reality, we can say that dunya was brought first in this ayah simply because it comes first in order. We're living in the dunya and then we're going to go to the akhirah. Whatever the case is, but this is abuse of the meaning of the ayah, right? Allah is not telling us to now leave whatever we're doing in the akhirah and just focus on the dunya. And we don't see examples. We have to look at the lives of Sahaba radiallahu anhum. The thing is, it's ironic because many times we say things like this, that this ayah teaches us that we should also seek for our dunya. But the problem is that we're not even doing anything about the akhirah. We're only focusing on the dunya, and we're quoting this ayah that we should also focus on the dunya. Whereas the thing we should be more focused on is focusing on the akhirah. So this is actually a trick of shaitan. He's making us mess up our priorities and making us actually feel that working for the dunya is more important whereas literally working for the dunya is just a for a purpose of fulfilling our needs. And our real purpose in this dunya is to remember Allah and to prepare for the hereafter. That's literally the reason Allah created us. So He didn't create us to strive for the dunya. So the thing is that we have to really understand this ayah in its proper context, in the context of the entire deen. That's the problem again. We take ayat out of their context, and we think we have a very strong proof, whereas we have to look at the context. We're looking at the deen overall. So this is something we have to be very careful of. And I guess I'm almost out of time again, but we can go over some ways to protect ourselves from shaitan quickly, inshallah. So how can we protect ourselves from shaitan? The first is to seek refuge from Allah. Many places in the Quran, when Allah mentions shaitan, then Allah says, seek refuge in Allah. فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ وَإِمَّا يَمْزَغَنَّكَ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ نَزْغٌ فَاسْتَعِذْ بِاللَّهِ. Seek refuge in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And just in general, remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the Salaf actually asked his student, what do you do when the devil whispers to you? He replied, I fight him back. The teacher asked, what if he returns? He replied, I fight him. The teacher asked again, what if he returns? The student repeated again, I fight him. The teacher said, this will take too long. Do you see, if you try to pass by some sheep and the shepherd's dog barks at you to prevent you from passing, what would you do? He replied, I would struggle to fight and repel him. The teacher replied, this would take too long. Instead, seek the assistance of the sheep's owner. He would suffice you from him. So this is an important lesson for us to learn, that sometimes we might spend so much effort fighting shaitan back, and trying, but we don't even think, why don't I just say A'udhu billahi minash shaitan rajim? Why don't I just seek refuge from Allah? Because at the end of the day, everybody's in the control of Allah. The devil, shaitan, does not work in independence from Allah. It's not like he can literally do anything he wants. He is not an adversary of Allah in the sense that he is his equal now whatsoever. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is completely in control. So if we seek refuge in Allah, and Allah is obviously, there is no comparison to the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the power of shaitan. Shaitan literally doesn't have any power except if Allah allows him to have any power. So, and that is why actually, if you look in the ayah of the Quran, right, from whatever we mentioned earlier, we see that, wow, shaitan actually has some very strong tricks, and he is deceiving us to a great extent. But now if we look at a different ayah, Allah actually says, إِنَّ كَيْدَ الشَّيْطَانِ كَانَ ضَعِيفًا. Indeed, shaitan's schemes are ever weak. We might be surprised because, well, these don't seem weak to me. These seem pretty strong. Well, actually, the scholars mentioned they're actually weak when it's compared to Allah's help, because Allah's help is much stronger than the deception of shaitan. So if we literally just seek the help of Allah and we have firm determination, then we should know that shaitan's schemes are ever weak. But the thing is, we just have to seek Allah's help. So one of the most important things when it comes to shaitan, again, it could seem kind of overwhelming, thinking that shaitan's literally going to come out from every angle, as mentioned in this ayah. At this for centuries and centuries, so he knows the game really well, and he's going to trick me, etc. It might become overwhelming. He's going to misguide me. He's never going to stop until I die. It might become overwhelming, and you learn about all the different deceptions of Iblis, and you might think, wow, I'm really going to hellfire. May Allah protect us. But we have to know this, that if we seek refuge in Allah, then all these things are completely weak, and shaitan himself is completely weak. He has no power unless Allah gives him power. So if we seek refuge in Allah, then Allah will take care of us. Just like this example that one of the Salaf gave, that if the shepherd just tells his dog to stop barking, or he just pulls at the dog or something, then he will stop barking at the person passing by. But if the person keeps trying to fight the dog and repel the dog, then this would be so much work, and he would probably get injured in the process. But if you just tell the sheep's owner that, oh, I'm passing by, you can just tell your dog to not attack me, then he will just take care of him. So just like that, Allah, the owner of shaitan, is Allah. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you beg Allah to protect us from him, then Allah will protect us from him, inshallah. And that's why even before we recite the Quran, we say, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And then be aware and on guard. And yeah, that's a very important point. As we mentioned, that Allah in many places in the Quran, he mentions that shaitan is an enemy for us. So take him as an enemy. So why is that mentioned? It's just as if you're going to an area which is dangerous. Now imagine if somebody didn't know the area was dangerous and is known for it's robberies and thefts. And so a person goes and he leaves his car open, for example, he doesn't lock his car. People who live in suburban areas, maybe sometimes they're not so diligent, and they don't live in, and because there's area which have less theft. So maybe they leave their cars open because they don't really have a fear that somebody's going to steal the car or steal something from the car. But then, so imagine somebody does the same thing in an area known for robberies, right? Then they're not going to be on guard, and then somebody will steal their car, somebody will steal something from their car, or they won't be careful, and they'll go there at nighttime and they won't be on guard, and somebody will come up behind them, and, for example, hold them up and take all their money, right? But now if you're on guard all the time, and you're always thinking that, okay, this is an area that is a dangerous area, then that will help you in protecting yourself from such things. You'll take your precautions. So the same thing. If we're aware that shaitan is always after us and we're on guard, then that will really help us in protecting ourselves from his schemes. But if we're not even aware that he's there, we don't even think that he's there. If we think that shaitan is just a fairy tale, um, then we won't actually be able to protect ourselves from him. So that is why it's very important for us to be on guard and always think that shaitan's going to be trying to deceive me, so I have to be diligent and always have to be on guard and protect myself from his traps. Then increasing in iman, increasing in knowledge, these are two important tools for us to protect ourselves from shaitan, because if you have a high level of iman, then it will be easy for you to go against the whispers of shaitan. You will say, no, why would I do something against what Allah wants me to do? Because we will have a proper, a great connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. An increase in knowledge, because this will allow us to foil shaitan's tricks, because we will know a trick to be a trick. Whereas many a times shaitan can only deceive us because of our ignorance of the deen. But the more we increase in our knowledge of the deen, and the more we increase in our iman, the less likely it is for shaitan to be able to attack us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect every single one of us from shaitan, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to seek his refuge anytime shaitan comes to us. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to increase our iman, increase us in our knowledge, and be on guard from shaitan's tricks. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. And I didn't mean from mentioning the ayah, ربنا آتنا, we shouldn't feel bad if we had ever used this ayah in the context, because it's so common to use the ayah in the context that, we should focus on dunya. Like when somebody's too focused, when somebody is, mashallah, taking the path of the deen, you see them that they're getting closer and closer to the deen, then many times people use this ayah in order to tell them that, don't go too much into the deen. And they use this terrible example that, oh, the deen is like an ocean. If you go too much into it, you'll drown. So people misuse the ayah, and they say that that you shouldn't go too much into the deen. Whereas that is not the purpose of the ayah. So I didn't mean to do full-blown tafsir of the ayah, just to explain that that's not a proper understanding of the ayah, and this is not a proper understanding of deen in general, because we are ordered to completely enter into the deen and to follow all of his commandments, right? And try our best to give our lives for sake of, and make our lives completely compatible with the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Obviously at the same time work for the dunya, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to leave doing what you're doing in the deen. Rather, we make our dunya according to the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all tawfiq. I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot if you have used this ayah. It's just become so common to use in that context that maybe we might even think that that's what the ayah means. I just wanted to clarify. SubhanAllah, bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk.